If you are listening to this right now, I want you to just take a second and mentally scan your environment, or even just take a quick inventory of how your day has unfolded so far. Because we are living in this hyper-connected, relentlessly fast-paced world, and well, if you are anything like the rest of us, you probably feel this low-level, constant hum of overwhelm.
Yeah, that hum is very real.
Right. It might be the physical clutter that's piling up on your kitchen island, or the digital noise of messages and news alerts pinging every few minutes, or just that really heavy pressure to somehow optimize every single second of your life. It's just cognitively exhausting.
It really is an epidemic. I mean, we have built these environments where we are perpetually absorbing data, accumulating material goods, and packing our schedules so tightly that there is absolutely zero margin for error, let alone margin to just breathe. We sort of operate under this assumption that adding more apps, more productivity hacks, more stuff is the only way to fix that feeling of being stretched too thin.
And that is the exact paradox we are diving into today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our source material for this analysis is Steve Zimkowski's 2026 book, The Best Ways to Live the Simple Life. And our mission here is to distill the most actionable, psychologically sound strategies from Zimkowski's work so you can actually reclaim your time, your physical space, and your mental bandwidth.
Exactly.
But I do want to set the baseline right up front for you listening. This is not a basic tutorial on how to fold your t-shirts or throw out old mail. We are looking at a highly structured, holistic approach to auditing how you actually live.
And that holistic angle is where Zimkowski's work really gets interesting. We're going to map these practical decluttering tactics directly to human psychology and behavioral economics, because simply throwing things away just doesn't work long term. If you don't understand the underlying neuroscience of why you accumulate objects in the first place, or the anxiety that drives your need to constantly be busy, you're just going to refill those empty spaces within a month.
Okay, let's unpack the core philosophy here. Zimkowski spends the first part of the book aggressively redefining minimalism. He anchors it in that old adage that less is more, but he applies it as a cognitive framework. It's not just an interior design choice.
Precisely. His thesis is that minimalism extends far beyond the physical boundaries of your home. It's a systematic stripping away of excess to isolate and focus on what genuinely matters to you. And that excess takes a lot of different forms. I mean, it's the physical junk in the garage, sure, but it's also the clutter in your mental and emotional landscapes.
Yeah.
The goal isn't emptiness. The goal is creating the necessary friction to stop mindless accumulation so you can foster deeper focus and clarity.
I am really glad you brought up the idea of emptiness because I want to challenge some of the prevailing stereotypes around this. When most people hear the word minimalism, they immediately picture a very specific, stark aesthetic. So let's break down a few of the myths Zimkowski tackles. The first one is this inherent assumption of deprivation, this idea that to be a minimalist, you have to sacrifice all comfort and live in a sterile white room with, like, one wooden chair.
Right, which is a completely unlivable standard for most human beings. Zimkowski argues that the deprivation model is just a fundamental misunderstanding of the whole concept. Minimalism, in its functional form, is about intentionality. It's making deliberate choices that actively enhance your baseline quality of life. By removing the objects and obligations that drain your cognitive reserves, you are actually making room for the things that provide high-yield fulfillment. You aren't getting rid of things to suffer. You are getting rid of the wrong things so you can fully appreciate the right things.
That distinction makes a lot of sense. But what about the socioeconomic aspect of it? Because myth number 2 is that minimalism is inherently a privilege. It's viewed as this trendy lifestyle for wealthy tech bros who can afford to buy a $150,000 architecturally designed tiny home. Or people who can just throw things away because they know they can easily afford to replace them if they make a mistake.
And that is a very valid critique of how minimalism has been marketed over the years. But Zimkowski points out that the trendy aesthetic minimalism is actually just another insidious form of consumerism. It's buying expensive, minimalist-branded items to achieve a specific look.
Buying more to look like you have less.
Exactly. True simplicity, as he defines it, is an entirely accessible psychological posture. It has nothing to do with your income bracket or whether your living room furniture matches. It is simply the relentless prioritization of your core values and lived experiences over the acquisition of material goods.
Let's test that theory against the third myth, the idea that this lifestyle stifles creativity or leads to isolation. I think the fear is, well, if I stop buying hobby gear or if I clear out my space, I'm just going to be sitting around staring at a blank wall with nothing to do.
The irony there is that physical and digital noise are the actual enemies of flow states and creativity. Zimkowski cites research showing exactly how a chaotic environment fractures our attention span. When you remove those low-level, constant visual distractions, you experience a sort of vacuum effect.
Like it pulls you in.
Right. Without the noise, you are forced to confront your own internal landscape, which is where deep, focused creativity actually originates from. Furthermore, families often find that when they remove the buffer of excessive toys or individual screens, they're actually forced to interact with each other. The friction of boredom catalyzes shared experiences and deepens social bonds.
So for you listening, I want you to run a quick diagnostic on your own life. Look at your physical spaces, look at your calendar, look at your daily habits. Are these things accurately reflecting your actual stated values? Or are they just a reflection of societal momentum, advertising, and the unspoken pressure to keep pace with your peers?
Recognizing that disconnect is usually the catalyst for change. But the transition from that realization to actual execution is where people usually get stuck.
Which brings us to the tactical frameworks Zimkowski provides in the book.
Let's get into the mechanics of that. For physical decluttering, Zimkowski relies heavily on what he calls the four-box method. The structure is incredibly rigid. You tackle one small, defined space at a time, like a single drawer or one closet, and you bring exactly 4 boxes. Keep, donate, discard, and relocate.
And the rigidity is intentional because it eliminates decision fatigue. The criteria for each box are absolute. The first box, keep, is not a holding pen for things you might need someday. You only place items in this box if they bring a high degree of utility or genuine active joy to your life.
The donate box is for items that retain their functional value, but no longer serve your specific needs. They are resources that can be redeployed to benefit someone else.
But let me play devil's advocate here on the keep box, because it's easy to be objective about a blender you haven't used in 3 years. But what does Zimkowski say about the sentimental minefield? You know, the old childhood photos or the ugly porcelain vase your grandmother gave you that you keep purely out of guilt?
That is the hardest part for most people by far.
Yeah.
Zimkowski differentiates between items that spark genuine joy and items that invoke a sense of obligation or guilt.
Yeah.
If you are keeping an object solely because discarding it feels like a betrayal of a memory or a person, that object is effectively holding you emotionally hostage.
Wow.
He suggests keeping a very small, highly curated selection of sentimental items, a memory box, and taking photos of the rest before letting the physical objects go. The memory is inside you, not the porcelain vase.
That is a tough pill to swallow, but I definitely see the logic. Now, the third box is discard, which is strictly for items that are broken, expired, or beyond repair. And the fourth is relocate, for items that belong in another room but have somehow migrated to the space you are cleaning.
And this is key. You do not leave that room to relocate the item until the sorting session is completely over. Otherwise, you risk getting distracted and starting a whole new project in the other room. This method forces a highly mindful, almost analytical examination of your possessions. You are no longer just shuffling piles of clutter from a desk to a chair. You are actively auditing the utility of your environment.
Now, if that feels too intense, Zimkowski does offer an alternative that gamifies the process, the 30-day minimalism game. On day 1, you get rid of 1 item, day 2, 2 items, and so on, until day 30, where you have to find 30 items to eliminate in a single 24-hour period.
The psychological arc of this game is fascinating. The first one is incredibly easy. You are just throwing away obvious trash, broken pens, expired coupons, things like that. But as the numbers compound in the 3rd and 4th weeks, you exhaust those easy targets.
I can actually speak to this personally. I tried a variation of this game once, and by day 14, I was frantically tearing through my junk drawer looking for old, faded receipts just to hit the quota of 14 items. I realized I wasn't really making tough choices. I was just finally taking out the trash.
Exactly. But if you play it honestly, around day 20, you hit a wall, you are forced to confront the sunk cost fallacy. You have to look at a jacket you spent $200 on but never wore, and you have to analyze the guilt and the identity attached to that purchase. The game forces introspective reflection on your accumulation habits. It builds the neural pathways required for intentional living.
But let's shift gears, because physical clutter is only half the battle. We need to talk about the digital landscape. For an informed audience, this is arguably where the real insidious overwhelm lives right now. Zimkowski places a massive emphasis on digital decluttering.
The neuroscience here is impossible to ignore. Digital clutter triggers the exact same stress responses in the brain as a messy physical room. The Zeigarnik effect dictates that our brains fixate on uncompleted tasks. So an inbox with 4,000 unread emails or a smartphone screen littered with red notification badges acts as a constant subconscious reminder of unresolved obligations. It keeps your nervous system in a mild, perpetual state of fight or flight.
Which perfectly explains the subtle spike of anxiety every time you unlock your phone. Zimkowski's strategies for this are pretty aggressive. He advocates for achieving inbox zero, not necessarily as a productivity hack, but as a form of nervous system regulation. Taking an afternoon to ruthlessly unsubscribe from every newsletter you ignore, archiving old threads, and silencing non-essential notifications.
He also tackles the digital photo archive, which is a major cognitive burden for modern adults. We take photographs to preserve memories, but when you have an unsearchable camera roll of 60,000 images, including 50 slightly different angles of the exact same sunset, the volume destroys the value. Precisely. You never actually go back and look at them. Zimkowski suggests dedicating scheduled blocks of time to prune these libraries, delete the duplicates, the screenshots, the blurry photos, curate the remaining images into specific albums. By reducing the volume, you elevate the significance of the photos you actually keep.
If we pull back and look at the macro picture here, why are we hoarding 60,000 photos and closets full of unworn clothes in the first place? Zimkowski spends a significant portion of the book dissecting the psychology of modern consumerism.
He essentially outlines how late-stage consumerism hacks our evolutionary biology. We are social creatures, wired to signal our status and identity to our tribe. The modern market exploits this by blurring the lines between what we own and who we are. We buy things not for their utility, but to construct and project a specific identity.
The concept of the fantasy self. We buy the expensive camping gear not because we actually camp, but because we want to be the kind of person who camps. It fuels this relentless throwaway culture where we are chasing an idealized version of ourselves through retail therapy.
Which brings us to Zimkowski's elevated analysis of needs versus wants. Now, obviously, everyone knows the fundamental difference between needing food and wanting a luxury car. But Zimkowski examines how sophisticated marketing algorithms artificially elevate wants to the psychological urgency of needs.
Ah, the dopamine cycle.
Exactly. The anticipation of a purchase, the act of adding an item to your digital cart releases a massive spike of dopamine. The actual acquisition of the item usually results in a crash, prompting you to start the cycle all over again. Zimkowski argues that to break this loop, you need advanced cognitive friction.
And he outlines actionable strategies to build that friction, making rigid, preemptive lists based on genuine utility before you ever engage with a marketplace to short-circuit the impulse buys. But the strategy that really stood out to me is his focus on emotional triggers. How often are we engaging in one-click shopping just to self-medicate?
For a significant portion of the population, shopping has become a primary stress response mechanism. It is a way to exert control when you feel anxious, or a way to seek novelty when you are bored.
It's the modern coping mechanism. We scroll and buy to numb out.
Zimkowski points out that once you identify the emotional trigger, say, noticing you open a shopping app every time you have a frustrating meeting at work, you can intercept the behavior. You create a mandatory cooling-off period, like a 48-hour rule for any non-essential purchase. In that window, you substitute the shopping with an alternative emotional regulator. A walk, engaging in a physical hobby, or simply stepping away from the screen entirely.
Which provides a really seamless transition into the physical world, specifically how this minimalist mindset intersects with sustainability and the analog tasks of daily life. Choosing a simpler life inherently means stepping off the treadmill of the convenience economy.
They are deeply intertwined. When you reduce your overall consumption and shift your focus to the longevity and utility of your purchases, you naturally lower your ecological footprint. You begin to prioritize quality over volume, opting for sustainably sourced materials like organic cotton, not just for the environmental benefit of reduced pesticide use, but because the item will physically last longer, removing you from the replacement cycle entirely.
And Zimkowski points to simple gardening as the ultimate analog anchor in a digital world. He frames getting your hands in the dirt as a digital detox in disguise. I found his approach to this really refreshing because it wasn't a dense, intimidating manual on agriculture.
No, he focuses entirely on the psychological and grounding benefits of the practice. The tactile feedback of the physical world is incredibly important for cognitive rest. When you are planting seeds or pruning leaves, you cannot be multitasking on a smartphone. It forces a deceleration of your internal clock to match the pace of the natural world.
And he keeps the barrier to entry low. Utilizing native plants that require minimal intervention, planting perennials, setting up passive systems like rain barrels. Even just cultivating a few herbs or tomatoes on an apartment balcony provides that sensory engagement and a tangible, frugal reward.
That frugality extends to his views on DIY culture and home management. But again, his angle isn't just about saving pennies. It is about reclaiming agency.
Right. It's a rejection of the hyper-specialized consumer market. We've been sold this idea that we need 15 different proprietary chemical sprays to clean 15 different surfaces in our homes. Zimkowski strips that down. He advocates for using foundational elements like vinegar and baking soda to handle the vast majority of domestic cleaning.
It is about reducing the supply chain of your own life. You eliminate the plastic waste, the financial drain, and the cognitive load of managing an inventory of toxic products. You simplify the system.
He applies that same systems thinking to the kitchen with batch cooking. This isn't just about meal prep, it's about cognitive offloading. You make a massive batch of a base ingredient like a complex chili one evening. You have secured dinner, but you've also engineered the architecture for the next day's lunch, repurposing it into chili nachos. You are radically minimizing the daily decision fatigue surrounding what to eat.
Every single one of these examples, the balcony garden, the simplified cleaning, the batch cooking, requires you to trade a small amount of intentional upfront effort in exchange for long-term mental peace. You are actively opting out of the passive convenience culture.
I want to look at how that intentionality applies to how we spend our leisure time, because Zimkowski has some strong opinions on travel and family dynamics. He introduces a framework he calls slow travel.
Slow travel is a necessary paradigm shift for anyone who feels like they need a vacation to recover from their vacation. Modern tourism has been entirely gamified. We approach travel with an optimizing checklist mindset. We try to maximize the return on our investment by sprinting through 3 European countries in 7 days, taking a photo in front of every major monument, and we return home neurologically fried.
It's just a different flavor of the hustle culture we are trying to escape.
Exactly. Slow travel is the deliberate rejection of that optimizing mindset. It means anchoring yourself in fewer locations for longer periods. It means traveling light, unburdened by excessive luggage. You prioritize integrating into a local neighborhood, supporting regional artisans, and allowing room for serendipity rather than adhering to a rigid, minute-by-minute itinerary. You are seeking depth of experience over breadth of exposure.
I can hear people asking, though, how do you practically negotiate that or any of this minimalist approach with a family, because you cannot forcefully declutter your spouse's things. And trying to convince young kids to give up screens for a quiet walk in the woods often sparks a lot of resistance.
Zimkowski is very clear that you cannot weaponize minimalism against your family. You have to lead by example and frame these changes around connection rather than deprivation.
So, introducing low-friction activities. Turning a weekend decluttering session into a game with a shared reward. Cultivating zero-cost traditions that build family identity, like collaborative storytelling, cooking meals together as an event rather than a chore, or taking nature hikes where devices are strictly banned.
The crucial psychological component to making any of this work within a family unit is abandoning perfectionism. Perfectionism is the absolute enemy of a simple life. If your goal is a flawlessly executed magazine spread family vacation or a perfectly weeded symmetrical garden, you are just recreating the stress you were trying to escape in the first place.
That is such a vital point.
You have to value progress over perfection. The objective is the authentic connection forged while cooking the meal together, even if the kitchen ends up a disaster. The objective is the psychological rest you get in the garden, even if the plants aren't perfectly aligned.
So, to bring this all together for you listening, what is the ultimate takeaway from Zimkowski's work?
The core realization is that minimalism is not the finish line. Having an impeccably clean, empty house is not the prize. Minimalism is merely a diagnostic tool and a maintenance system. It is a method used to strip away the superficial noise so you can clearly hear what you actually value.
And because it is a tool, you can start using it immediately in very small increments. You do not need to burn your life to the ground and start over.
You can execute on this today. You can take 5 minutes this afternoon to unsubscribe from 10 newsletters that clutter your inbox. You can implement a 24-hour waiting period for the items sitting in your digital shopping cart right now. You can choose to leave your phone charging in another room while you eat dinner tonight. It is the compounding effect of those small, intentional friction points that eventually rebuilds your attention span and your peace of mind.
Before we wrap up, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over, a way to stretch the concepts we've discussed today even further. We spent a lot of time analyzing the four-box method for physical objects: keep, donate, discard, and relocate.
Right, and I want you to imagine applying that exact same rigid four-box framework, not to your closet, but to your time and your calendar obligations.
Think about your schedule for the upcoming week. Look at every meeting, every social commitment, every recurring task. What truly belongs in the keep box because it genuinely moves the needle on your goals or brings you deep joy? What tasks can you relocate by delegating them to someone else or moving them to a more appropriate time? And most importantly, what obligations in your life right now need to be put in the discard box? What can you absolutely cancel, decline, or walk away from right now to make room for the life you actually want to live?
Reclaiming your physical space is just the warm-up. Reclaiming your time is where the real work begins.
It really is. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope this analysis has equipped you with some advanced tools to clear out the noise, override the algorithms, and engineer a much more intentional week ahead. Take care, and we will catch you next time.